My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. I'm only here to even a score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Knighted Ones podcast, episode number 14. Nope, 48. 48. We are having all kinds of technical difficulties tonight. Nobra has started this podcast 4 times, and I just said 14 instead of 48. I don't know what's going on. However, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF National Champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst and hoops player, an infamous rapper, our resident influencer and IG star, shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. And remember to like and follow us on YouTube, IG, X, all of the tings, and check out the 70-plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle. So we had a rough start tonight. This will probably be a shorter podcast, unfortunately, but we have a lot to talk about. We've got the ACC Media Days going on right now. Talk about awkward. We'll talk a little bit about some more conference information, JRP, the SEC commissioner throwing shade at UCF, the Wayne Dench Foundation being charitable as always, a little bit of hoops, and where John Rothstein has UCF this year. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring on Nobra. What's up, Nobra? Welcome to the stage.
Oh, no, hey now.
Hey now. Let's see that hair flip. All right, so he did that right. You know, he didn't start the podcast 4 times, but he did that right, folks. No, thank you, Nobra, for being here with us. We appreciate it. He works a very, very busy schedule and works on other shows, so thank you for being here.
Of course.
All right, and someone we've been missing for a little while, Trey Neal, welcome back to the show. What's up, Trizzle?
Greetings, gentlemen. How you doing?
See, you always say gentlemen, and I'm always like, that's just not an accurate description of who this cast of motley characters are, but I appreciate it anyway.
We're PG, so, you know.
There you go. PG. All right, Trey, since you weren't here for the infamous hair flip, let's see yours. All right, another bobblehead, folks. Bobblehead. See, we're trying to record all of these to maybe include that in a video of hair flips later on. I think Nobra is still the clear winner. All right, and to add on to the hair fiasco, we've got our good friend, Alan Levin. Thank you. Welcome back to the show. Unfortunately, he did not cut his hair, so I was super upset when I saw him before the show. So he's got his flowing locks. However, I am going to throw him out and throw him under the bus here. He has promised that if and when, more like when we reach 500 followers on YouTube, he's going to cut his hair. How about that, Alan? And he's furiously typing at me that he's so mad right now. You heard the keyboard clacking.
Well, I would say, I think I know pre-show I said, whoa, what just happened to my screen there? I know I said pre-show that it was 500. I think I'm gonna have to up the amount of followers to 1,000. Let's get into
1,000.
Gotta make it worth it.
We gotta set some higher goals for ourselves. I mean, I grew my hair out for 2 years. I can't just 500 is too measly for me. I need 1,000.
All right. Come
on, there's got to be some stakes here.
1,000 it is, but just remember it's got to be shorter the longer the fewer amount of YouTube folks that we bring on as followers. So if you're going from 500 to 1,000, that means you got to cut more of it off.
We'll talk about it when the time comes.
Well, it's coming soon. Thank you, everyone. Just quick shout out to the new followers that have joined us over the last 30 days or so. We see you. We appreciate the follows and the likes and the commentary. We had a new follower who on YouTube, subscriber on YouTube, who threw a quick shout out to us in a comment. So welcome to the Knighted Ones. We appreciate it. All right, let's get into this. Nobra, you can hang out. You can go away. You can do it. He does what he always does. He goes away. Josh Lazar, last but not least, but always last, unfortunately did not make it. He actually has exhausted his vocal cords, so we will not have our battle of the oxymoronic stats of the week versus Josh's funny facts of the week. So I think that's another point for Alan. So that's 2 more points for Alan in our great battle. That being said, speaking of battles, there's a little battle going on between conferences right now. When we're talking about the ACC Media Days, we mentioned that. I actually have one of our fellow college huddlers, or cuddlers as we like to call them on here, who is at the Media Days and represents FSU. And the running joke was they were going to be shadow banned to the bathroom and without toilet paper. So it'll be really interesting to see what kind of access he gets. We'll probably have him on at some point soon to kind of talk about his experiences there. But he will also be joining us on the Big Three, the new Big Three podcast that's coming down the pipeline that does not include Miami because they have not earned it yet. So excited to talk about that a little bit, but the FSU Clemson drama, it's kind of interesting because you've got FSU on one hand being loud and boisterous, you've got Clemson on the other hand that's not, and by and large Clemson fans are like, bring on the Big 12. So when it comes to Media Day, the commissioner of the ACC did make a brief statement earlier today and basically said, hey, they're members of the ACC. We'll still treat them that way, but we have a conflict, and he called it a conflict with 2 of our members without naming their names. So it's pretty interesting. He pretty much said, hey, they're still part of the conference. They're going to participate, but at the same time, he called it out. So I think he's big mad right now, and he should be, because those 2 really hold the key to their media deals. And, when the 4 biggest earning viewers in the conference are FSU, Clemson, Miami, and you guys guess the 4th?
North Carolina.
North Carolina it is. So those are the 4 biggest earners TV-wise. North Carolina is not the number 1 either. So if they lose FSU and Clemson, that's going to be a big deal. And there's already a lot of infighting going on within the ACC. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the Media Days, because I expect those stories to come out. Now, the ACC is going to keep it quiet, right, and try to. But unfortunately for the ACC, I think this may be the dam that breaks the ACC if FSU and Clemson get their way. So assuming that this happens, I'm going to ask you guys.
It's going to happen.
Well,
it's a matter of when.
All right. So the when, right? So we talked about last week how lucky UCF was to be in the Big 12 and to have Brett Yormark. I think he is angling for that, for the Big Three. And I think the SEC and the PAC would be happy with that. I don't think they want to add anybody on or try to justify any more money right now without consolidation, because no matter what anyone says or thinks, that contract with the ACC is still there. And as long as they replace those brands, which they kind of already have with Calford and Shmoo, who bought themselves in, they've still got a valid contract for the next till 2036, I think is what their contract runs through. So, ESPN is going to be stuck holding the bag, where this is all about consolidation, and that's not going to be able to go away. And the ACC, they will not be able to get through the ACC contract until after that. So ESPN's got to have a way to monetize that after the fact. So if it all does happen, right, and FSU and Clemson come, the remaining teams, unless the Big Ten decides to help UNC out, which, if FSU and Clemson do leave, that might be a possibility. And if it is a possibility, then, UNC might leave and Virginia might leave. And then we really might have a conversation about the future of the ACC and the ESPN contract as it sits right now. However, ESPN's going to have to make sure that makes sense for them, which means that's pretty much the death knell for the ACC. If they do you think that all three conferences should go to 24?
First, I think if Clemson and FSU leave, it's going to be an exodus like we just saw when USC and all of those guys left. It's gonna implode because those are kind of the heavyweights of that conference. Like you said, they kind of carry it, and then everybody else kind of, they feed off of it. So if they leave for greener pastures, that conference will probably be done within the year, I think. As far as going to 3 and 24, in my head, I've always said I think it's going to be 2. But you made a good point. Why would other teams want to take on these other teams and lower their income? Like, why would they do that without a consolidation? So I think it's possible to have 3. I think that would probably be the route, is 3 conferences of 24. Obviously, we're just talking football, and I think that's what we would try to hope for. Obviously, we try to get Clemson and FSU to come to the Big 12 to strengthen our conference. But we'll see. And I think if they don't, I think again North Carolina. There's a lot of good options I think that can help strengthen this conference, not only in football but basketball too. So it'll be interesting. I think that's where they probably should go. I think 3 and 24 is the safest route. If they get aggressive, I think, which is what I think ultimately they do, is go to 2. But I think 3 and 24 is the safest, while also getting that upside of having 3 conferences in all the teams. So I think that's what they should.
What do you think?
Yeah, look, it's like Trey said. If those two teams leave, the conference is obviously going to implode. It's kind of exactly what I said on last week's pod. Them coming to our conference is going to give us a huge boost if that's what ends up happening. It also seems like that FSU seems to be getting more of the rumors coming to us over compared to the Clemson. It seems like FSU they're kind of, no one wants to take them right now. Seems like Clemson's getting more of the love from like the SEC potentially, but I know Florida State has what's the thing that the Big 10 schools have?
AAU?
Yeah, the AAU accreditation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
except Nebraska.
Yeah, except for Nebraska.
They had it, but then they lost it. Yeah, so I think for me, like, there's some serious considerations here, right? So let's think about it, from a strategic vision here and play this out. I don't think that the Big 10 or the SEC or ESPN and Fox want to go to 24. That doesn't allow them consolidation. They just end up paying more for the same teams, right?
Yeah.
So, the SEC right now is at 16, which means they would need to take 8 teams on. And I don't think there's 8 brands out there, especially with the Big 10 being there in the mix, that would make sense for them to take. So those folks that are out there telling you 3 and 24, I don't think that's the case, right? I think that from a consolidation standpoint, for it to make financial sense, I do think there will be 3. I think this gives them the path. You just can't shut down multi-million-dollar contracts and ages of those contracts to get there. And I don't think they want to move that fast. I don't think they want that much disruption in the sport, especially with everything else that's going on right now. There's a new lawsuit, that just got dropped. They're trying to figure out a new way of governance, that the Big 12 will be included in that upper tier of governance. They're trying to implement this new rule from this other lawsuit that's happened. That's a lot going on for what's effectively, the CEOs of these major corporations, because that's really what conferences are. We think about it as, the Big 12 as a conference, but Brett Yormark's job is to look out for the Big 12, not for UCF or any individual school, right? Same way for, the ACC, et cetera. I do think that, FSU and Clemson have a shot. Not right now with the SEC and Big Ten. I don't think either one of them want to expand, but if either of those two schools leave and the Big 12 picks them up, I think the Big Ten will then go after Virginia and North Carolina. The problem for the SEC is who else would they pick up after that? You know what I mean? So there's not really anybody for them to pick up. So again, I don't see any way that we get to 24 teams apiece. The other part about this is what happens to the ACC. So let's say the ACC does fall apart. Right now we have 72 in that model, that 12x3, that would be 72 teams. So basically you're reshuffling the deck of the power teams from before, right? But in order for this to make financial sense and everybody to be motivated to do this, to take on more teams and either keep the same amount of money or increase their dollar value to be pushed into the conference, there's other teams that are going to have to be sacrificed. I hate to say that way, but, here's looking at you, Boston College and Wake Forest and everybody else, right? If it does happen and we increase the number of teams with FSU and Clemson or some other pairing that comes into the Big 12, my concern, and I'm going to ask you guys how concerned you guys are. I think from one perspective, it helps UCF because it helps it stay in a relevant conference for longer, which gives us more time to acclimate to what power football is. More time to be in the national media and be accepted as a power team. Although I think for the most part of the four that came over, I think we are the most accepted as deserving because how we performed last year, even though it wasn't, what our expectations were as UCF fans. So, but it does create a little bit of a conundrum. I think it does clear some playoff money that can be distributed back to the Big 12, and the SEC and the Big 10 will want a chunk of that. And if FSU and Clemson were to come, then the next time they renegotiate the amount, because remember this playoff deal was only 4 or 5 years. When they do that, then what ends up happening is if they try to go back and say, okay, well, look at the number of championships or BCS appearances or playoff appearances, right, within that span, and that's how they calculated it last time. We get FSU and Clemson, which has done really, really well within the past 10 years. You know what I mean? For UCF, though, it brings in more competition for that championship game and ultimately that auto bid into the playoff, right? So it'll be interesting how those dynamics work out. I think in UCF's case, it works in our favor because we get two bigger brands and we get the brand equity that comes with that from the conference. I think it works in our favor because some of those lower teams will be pushed out. Although, I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, Cal and Stanford, two big names in college football with a lot of history, are already below UCF's brand by virtue of what happened to the Pac, right? So I think that gives us more time to build. However, UCF's going to have to build. I think the Big 12 will be the filter for that Big 2 that you were talking about. So we've got a good 10 years, and we've been talking about this before. Our goal should be to elevate beyond the Big 12 and should have our sights set on the SEC. That's really where we should be looking to try to get to. Whether that happens or not, who knows, but that's what we should be striving for, right? And being the top of this league. I do think being in a conference with FSU and Clemson makes that a little harder. From a recruiting perspective, I do think it helps us a little bit because now we can say, hey, we're on equal playing terms with FSU. I think it would be awesome to have FSU in our conference and have a rivalry game with them, even if they're just here for 5 years and we play them consistently. I think that would be great from a fan experience perspective. I think it'd be good for the program. I think it would also be good from TV numbers. It harkens back to those UF FSU games back in the day. So it's really, really interesting. I don't think we go to the 12x3 just simply because the whole point of this is to consolidate brands and kind of filter for whatever it's going to look like in the future and to buy time. And so I think it's an opportunity for UCF to separate ourselves. We've already kind of done that over a lot of the mediocre ACC brands. Now it's, can we elevate ourselves within the traditional Big 12 brands and whoever else comes in. So that'll be super interesting to see how that all turns out. What do you guys think about that?
What did you say your concerns were? Sorry, though. Your main concern is just that the competition would be harder, basically, for our path to get to the playoff.
Yeah, I think there would be it would be more difficult for UCF to get to. The more teams you enter into the mix, the more difficult it's going to be, and more chances you're going to have a good team that you're going to play against for that year. Especially when you're talking about FSU and Clemson, who have traditionally been really good. Clemson, under Dabo Swinney, has only had one season, I think, that was under 10, and I think it's only one season that they haven't been in the ACC championship game. So, you know, Clemson's a good program. You know what I mean? Right. So that's going to be tough competition. Now, does that give us the opportunity, if it's us, Clemson, and FSU fighting for the two spots in the championship every year? Yeah, that'd be great for us if we're looked at the same level as FSU and Clemson, right? And being able to play at that level, even if we don't win. But at the same time, you know, it would be much better if we made it to the Big 12 championship game and hopefully won and got into the playoff and made some noise in the playoff. So that would be my concern. It'd be good on the one hand, but bad on the other, because you have more competition for those playoff bids. Even if we get more than one, if we have the auto bid plus another bid for the at-large or whatever they're going to call it, right?
I think if we added Clemson and FSU, I think our at-large bid
goes up.
I think it would increase. I think it's one of those things where adding them makes the conference stronger, which in turn, you lose to them, you're not really penalized in a sense, because those are very good programs. Kind of like, you know, for example, a Penn State. If your losses every year to Ohio State and Michigan, well, I mean, you're not a bad program just because you lose to them. You can't out recruit them. You might not beat them that year. Not saying that that's what happens with us, but I just think that having those kind of programs kind of elevates your total conference, which helps the at-large bids. Because Penn State every single year is, we can win a national championship. It's hard to get through Ohio State.
We just got to win.
Yeah. And that's now that we have 12 teams, I think that matters now. Whereas before, when it was just 4, you pretty much had to win your conference to get a chance outside of the one-offs with, Alabama and Georgia not doing that.
Well, the only thing with that is that ESPN wholly owns the SEC, and they wholly own the playoff, and they're going to get as many
SEC will have
SEC teams as they can in there.
Yeah, every year out of the 12, the SEC will probably. I would bet a lot of money that they have most of the teams, or the highest percentage share of the teams in the playoffs, just because of that reason. But I think instead of us maybe just having one, in a sense, like as it currently is, I could see maybe our Big 12 champion, and depending on that runner-up team, how their season goes, maybe they get an at-large bid. You add in a Clemson and FSU, I think you could possibly see three possible teams in that playoff, maybe 4, just depending on other outside factors. And I think that's what having them brings would be not only positive, but that's one of the good things it brings. It adds a potential spot. Now, adding those 2 takes away, and it makes our road harder. But that's what we want at UCF. We want to play those teams. We want to, if we go to FSU, we go to Clemson and beat them. That's what we want, and it makes us a reliable team. It makes us more credible. Just like when we beat all these, throughout history, we've beaten all these big time teams. Well, now we get to do that where, quote unquote, they care and it matters, and I think that helps when we can do that. That even makes our credibility even more. So I would like it if we could get them, just because, again, it'd be awesome to have those games, and it makes the conference stronger in general, especially if ultimately you want to keep it as a Big 3 and avoid a potential Big 2.
Alan, what do you think?
I mean, I feel like on some levels, it a little bit kind of contradicts that conversation we had, a few weeks ago, where it's like, would it mean if you're going to be within the big boy conference in meaningful games, but you're going to be, 6-6 or 7-5 every year? We kind of all agreed that in order to play for the top spot or to be in a relevant conference and not relegated to, Division II or whatever, we'd be okay with it. So yes, obviously there's the concern that it will be more difficult to win when you have two programs like Florida State and Clemson coming in that, historically win their conference every year. And that just adds to already some tough additions like Utah recently, and some of the schools that we've added in recently, and not to mention the leftovers from the conference that are still very formidable and win the conference quite often, whether it's TCU, Oklahoma State, or Kansas State, or whatever the case may be. But I think in this world that we live in now in college football, where conferences are getting eaten up, everything is getting consolidated. I think we discussed on last week's show that our commissioner is doing the right thing by going after them, and if you can get them, that's a big win, because we want to stay as relevant as possible. I mean, we've been kind of adding a bunch of decent, pretty decent programs over the past 2 years. Like the 8 schools that have been added, let's be honest, none of them are like premier blue blood programs in college football.
What are you talking about? UCF's 27.
Well, besides
champion
UCF,
win.
I meant besides UCF, of course. So when you can add, Clemson and Florida State, 2 recent national title winners, that's a big thing. I think you got to kind of welcome the competition, because in my mind, like, if we can't beat Florida State and Clemson in our own conference, hypothetically, we're probably not going to get that far in the playoff anyways, right? So unless the goal is just to make the first round every year and be okay with that and then get eliminated right off the bat. But if you can't beat Florida State and Clemson, then you're probably not going to beat whoever else as you advance along in the playoffs. So for me, I think those concerns, they exist, but I think the positives far outweigh it. And look, you got to be the best, you got to beat the best. So,
oh my God, don't be the cows. Come on. Don't be the cows.
I mean, not their stupid marketing slogan, but in general, like if you can't beat someone in your own conference, you're not going to be able to get to the national championship game and beat the team that's in there that did beat their conference, plus all the other conference champions in the path to get there.
So I agree with you. My only concern is the timing, right? Because I do think we're on a path to whatever it's going to look like in the future. I think Fox and ESPN, I think they probably kind of like the fact that they can get the most number of brands consolidated as they can under a joint banner. So the SEC is owned by, ESPN. However, they have a part of the Big 12. I think that works for them because they have to pay less to have additional inventory. And the Big 10 has kind of parted out their deal as well. So everybody still gets to stay in and doesn't have to pay as much, and we still get to increase the sport, right? So ultimately, I think that might be a model that kind of sticks around. That being said, the concern for me is the timing of it. I would agree with you largely. I still agree with you, but I think I would agree more with you. And the concern and hesitation I have is that last year we learned a hard lesson, right? And that was we didn't have the depth to compete week in and week out. Our quarterback went down. RJ was hurt. We had a slew of other guys that were hurt throughout the season. It's rough, right? And so we said, okay, well, now we're going to rebuild our entire team based on the experiences that we've had this past year. So now, okay, we're in this building mode. We're in the building the brand, building the football program and the team as far as the players are concerned to get them there, right, to be able to compete on that level. But we also need to stand out in the Big 12 enough so that if there is consolidation to, let's say, 64 teams or whatever that number is going to be, that we can make enough noise in our own conference to be able to do that, right? So that's my concern, is the timing of it. But I do think, from the Big 12's perspective, I think that it would be advantageous for us as kind of like an incubator to keep that brand, kill the ACC, and give ourselves that runway to be able to build ourselves for the next 8 to 10 years. Because I think if they do move, it'll take 2 contract cycles. And one of the things that I'd mentioned on here, when we were talking about, this was a few weeks ago, when we were talking about how this could happen, it would be that the PE money would pay the jailbreak for Clemson and FSU, right? And they would then be added to the Big 12, but they would not get unequal revenue sharing once they came over. So they'd get the money to get out of the ACC. They may get a little bit of a bump in the short term to entice them over, but then they'd have to sign a longer term agreement, with the bet being that eliminating the ACC, or at least taking the teeth out of them for the next contract cycle, and also putting us in a position where we have consolidated those brands for our own contract, that we end up in a situation where that contract value is more. And that would make sense for PE. And like I said, then the number crunchers that are going to give this money, they're putting a bet on the Big 12 for a reason, because they're asking for 20% stakes. So their return on their investment is going to be how much that value is later on. So it has to be a play like that. And you heard Brett Yormark say that, yes, we're exploring PE, but it's got to be on our terms. So I think that's being negotiated, and I think that's ultimately the goal. But this week, there was reporting coming out saying that, yes, they're going to use the PE money to help Clemson and FSU. However, it will not be unequal revenue sharing afterwards. And I think that makes the most sense for everybody involved, to be honest. What do you guys think about that?
Trey?
I mean, it's going to be hard. I mean, I don't know all the nuance of, these kind of negotiations. I try to understand it from just program what they are. Granted, can the Clemson and the SEC go to, or not Clemson, can Clemson and Florida State, do they have a potential offer to go to the SEC? I don't know. That's what I've always heard, just even when I was playing. They've always been talking about realignment, and that's kind of what they were saying is Clemson, SEC, FSU, SEC. If that's not an option, I guess just leverage it. If the Big 12 is really the only viable option for them, then yeah, you have to agree to our terms in that sense. If the Big 10 is saying they want to offer an olive branch to them, if the SEC is saying they want to do it, but they want to come to the Big 12, then I think we kind of lose that leverage in the sense of, hey, we have to, there's going to be unequal shares. So I think at least that's just how I see it. It's just going to depend on what their leverage is. If they don't have leverage, absolutely, you guys just come in. You take on the terms that we're going to give you. Of course, we want you because of who you guys are. But if you don't come here, you're going to be left out in the strands, and it's quote unquote. But, if they have other options and their choices to come here, then that would be leverage on their hands.
I think the leverage for the Big 12 is, hey, you don't have to try to go get that PE money. Because remember, FSU came out, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago or whatever, and said, hey, we're going to go get PE money to help us get out of this conference. Everybody kind of scoffed at it, right? So if we're saying, hey, we the Big 12, which is 12 teams instead of one team trying to carry that burden, right? We're going to do that for you. I think that's the leverage, because that gets them out.
Yeah. I mean, and again, if they're trying to get out, you're right. That it would be, listen, if you're trying to get out, here is your olive branch. You're going to have to be on our terms, but you're out. Or you try to play the waiting game if you're not going to do that. So I agree. I think ultimately that's what I think it is. It's just going to be, who bites and who gives into whichever situation unfolds. But it'll be, I think Yormark is doing the right thing. I think to build the conference up, you have to play this kind of game. It's a game of chicken in a sense.
I think Yormark, and this is a comment I made somewhere, Yormark is looking at this like a CEO. It's his job to look at it from the best interest of the conference, and the best interest of the conference means creating the most value. And at this point, if you see what's happening to the Pac and what we're talking about with the ACC, it's a matter of survival, right?
Exactly.
So I think he's being proactive in doing that. I think he's also trying to make us more valuable to the PE company by saying a lot of the things that he's trying to explore to create revenue, right? So if we're talking about things like putting logos on the jerseys, right? That's something he's trying to get pushed through the NCAA and those kinds of things. He's looking at this as a business. And I think that works counter to what the SEC and the Big Ten and the rest of college football fandom has really looked at it as, right? So I think he's disruptive to the industry. I think that's the one way that we can catch someone like the Big Ten and the SEC with their pants down, is because they all come from either academia or they come from athletics. So they don't think with a business mindset that way. They think within the rules of what college football has been. And I think Brett Yormark completely thinks opposite of that. He pushes because he knows that we've got to get as much value as possible. I think that's why we survived the Pac-12 when he made that move, when he undercut that deal and went early. And I think that's why he's going to outfox the ACC, right? And I think for the UCF is lucky that we got in. I mean, stars aligned for us when we got into the Big 12 because of the leadership, and because the leadership at the Big 12 schools recognized that and brought someone in and let them do it. The Big 10 tried to do that with their former commissioner, and he tried to look at it from a business perspective, but the ADs pulled back the yoke, and all of a sudden he was gone. They got a new commissioner that plays by the rules. So I think that combo is what's allowing us to survive. For UCF, we have to look at it as, okay, this is stability for a fixed period of time. Now we've got to elevate ourselves to the point that we're above all of these other brands that not too long ago we were fighting for relevance with, right? In recruiting and everything else. I mean, really from a brand value perspective, the rise is meteoric when it comes to UCF and how it's thought of in the media, and also from a brand perspective. Oh, yeah. You said something earlier, we better win, right?
Yeah.
If we do win, yeah. And I think Gus is fully aware of that. His whole initiative of the, putting a fence around Orlando and all that stuff, if he's not winning, that's going to be much harder to accomplish. So if we can do that, and we can win, I think Terry Mohajir, I think the President Cartwright, and I think Gus Malzahn are very well aware that this is our opportunity to elevate, so that when the next round comes, we have the opportunity to show that A, we're nimble enough financially, B, we can compete, C, we can recruit, and all of those things that we talked about in Orlando, and bringing the fans, bringing commitment. I think it's huge that the city of Orlando is now committed because we're in a power conference. We have that level of commitment that we can bring a big name brand or outperform those that are resting on their laurels. So I think this next 8 to 10 years is going to be extremely important for UCF. For the Big 12, I think it's going to be extremely important to stay relevant and outlast the Pac and the ACC, because let's be real, Brett Yormark is not going to be around through 2 contract cycles. I think if he's successful in what he's doing right now, I think he lasts until the next contract cycle, renegotiates that, and then he bounces to bigger and better things. And quite frankly, he's earned it. So what's the Big 12 going to do with that? And I think for UCF, we got to be real aware of that and make sure that we're ready to step up and have separated ourselves from everybody else. This is the chance. This is the opportunity right now. Can we do it?
Yeah. And I agree, because the relevance part, I think like you're saying, we have a brand, we're very recognizable, even just throughout the country. When I was getting recruited, it was a lot more local and connections that, about UCF or you don't. Now I go to my high school, everybody knows about that. I go just around that area, people know about UCF. We're pulling recruits throughout that entire county. And I mean, even just looking at it from that perspective, it's recognizable. Kids want to come to Orlando. They know a lot more than I knew about Orlando than when I was getting recruited. But again, it all starts from winning. You know, winning gets you on TV. Winning gets you the big time games. Winning gets you the prime time slots. We know this from our 2017-2018 run. You guys want to get on college football and have host, college game day, win games. That's just ultimately what it comes down to. College game day, huge boost for our brand. And it's things like that where it's like, dude, we have the talent now. Supposedly we have the depth, and I believe we do. We have to make it happen. It's not.
Well, look at our, to your point on the time slots, though, look at our time slots this year versus last year. We were unproven last year. We were the best, quote, best of the four coming in. And a lot of people are picking us over schools like Colorado and Arizona State,
exactly.
That are coming in. So guess what? We got better time slots because they're expecting us to perform.
And it's not the time slots that, Colorado's getting a lot of their time slots just because the players, not necessarily their program and what they've done. We've got to a point where we're a respected program, so people want to watch us play football. Like, that's what we're at. I think Colorado, I may be wrong, but I think when these kids leave this next year, they're not going to be talked about how they're talked about in the media now. It's going to be Deion, and that's it. And they definitely have to win, because if they go out and lose 2 years in a row, what's the program? Because your son's gone, Travis is going to be gone. Like, that's why they get all their slots right now.
They're already setting expectations, though, and lowering expectations. To be frank,
yeah. I mean,
their AD came out and said, "Hey, look, last year was progress. We won more games. I think they won one game before that, and they won 4 games last year." Yeah. He's like, the goal this year is to get to a bowl game. So that's Colorado's mentality, right?
But I think that's a realistic mentality for the program. I don't think with all the noise coming out of that program, that's not gonna fly. People are gonna ask a lot of questions. Should they? No, but when you advertise yourself as that, this is what you have to deal with, And I think,
are they, or is Deion?
No, Deion is. I mean, Deion is, his son is, because they're great players, but the way their game, the way that they talk, it's like they should be contending for a Big 12 championship. That's what they think they should do because of them. I don't know if they're looking at their roster and thinking that. I don't think that that's realistic. But when you have those expectations as a player and as a coach that is outspoken, and granted, Deion he was a good player. I think he's a good coach. I don't know about some of his tactics are questionable. I don't know too much about it, but I just wouldn't go. I think he talks a lot about – I think he talks it up, and it's exciting, and it brings viewership. Deion does. But with that, you have to perform, which is why I think when you look at UCF, we've gotten to a point where in 2017, 2018 specifically, we did a lot of talking, but we backed it up on the field. We were out there winning games, and we weren't just winning games. We were blowing the doors off of teams because we're like, we should be regarded as a top team. We're doing everything these other top teams are doing. So I think we've gotten to that point now where we have that credibility where we can blow the doors off of very good teams. So I think that's why you're saying
we could for 3 quarters last year.
I think that's the frustrating part because and I think teams see that, like they see, holy smokes, UCF, this is their first year in the Big 12, and they're in here competing with these Big 12 blue bloods off rip, just off of pure talent, off of roster, not even depth. And I think people take notice of that. And then you come in this year. I think that's why it's a big. I mean, I've been saying this since December, January. This is a big year for UCF because all of the talent, it's year 4. We have the talent. We should have the depth by now. It's a matter of winning. And I think that's going to be the difference. It's going to be on Saturdays. It's not going to be recruiting. It's not going to be, the fans showing up. It's not going to be all of the extracurriculars that we have to show off and do that. That's not what it's going to be about anymore. It's about on Saturday in these primetime games with everybody watching, are we going to win games? And if we do, I think the sky's the limit. I think this could catapult us to where we've always wanted to be. But if we don't, it's going to be tough, in my opinion, because I think we're in a small window to maximize. It's a big thing, I think.
Go ahead, Alan.
No, I mean, I think we've said this a couple times. I mean, Trey, you specifically brought up about Malzahn. Like, all right, he's got the flashy recruits. He continues to re-excite us every single year in the off season, primarily because of it's like we get the best recruiting class of all time. Then we up that even more. And now we're doing that again this year for the 4th straight season. I believe we're going to have our best ever recruiting class as far as ranking goes. But yeah, it's got to be on the field. I mean, I think now is the time to, put up or shut up because, and not only that,
strong words from Alan. Put up or shut up. I like it.
Yeah, well, the thing is here is that I've never seen, or not to my knowledge, not that I recall, at least for UCF coaches, and there's not too many coaches that would do this around the country, where they actually set an expectation of like, we got to win the conference this year. Like the only way that this thing takes off is pretty much what Gus Malzahn is saying is if we win. Like
you said that.
What was that?
He said that.
He said that our expectation is to win the conference here and we'll take, and if we do, this thing will take off, like meaning the program. I mean, he didn't say we have to do that for the program to take off, but he's putting that expectation out there that like, it's that he got all these veteran presence in the locker room with the transfers. He hired basically an entire new coaching staff or half of the coaching staff with the expectation that, this year has to be significantly better than last year. And especially when you talk about the 12-team playoff. And now, I mean, it's like you said, you got to maximize the window. And, another kind of lackluster year. I mean, it's like, even if we improve and we get to like 8 wins, like it's just not enough.
I was going to ask actually was what in Trey's scenario is 8 wins. What is that considered?
I think it makes us, it brings back the talk of what all the Auburn fans say. It's like Gus Malzahn will never have an atrocious type of year. He'll never have that O'Leary defeated kind of winless type of season and then go all over the place. He's like relatively consistent in like the 7 to 8 win range, but that's not like you need, like, it's almost sometimes better to kind of yin yang. I mean, it's nice. We've hit like a level of consistency. Like, there was interesting. The ESPN, when they did recently did a really good Big 12 their preview article, and the guy went in depth on the stats using the FPI stuff and all that. And one of his write ups were from 2000, essentially 10 to 2018. UCF had one of the most wild, inconsistent kind of records from year to year of all time, more than
Trey.
Like any other program. Yeah. Like we went winless and then 2 years later we went undefeated. Right. And now he made the point that in the last 3-4 years, you kind of just hit this level of consistency, which is nice to have stability, but that we don't want to be stuck in the 6 to 8, 9 win range. Like we need to get to the point where, we're at least relatively consistently getting to 10 wins, double digits. For me, I feel like, just because of how, if you really look back, as much as there's some great highs in Gus Malzahn's first 2 years in the American, overall is a disappointment. Losing to Navy twice, losing to ECU, losing the conference championship, losing 3 of our last 4 in our last year in the American to blow the opportunity to get to the Cotton Bowl and host the conference championship. Like with all those kind of underwhelming years, and then the fact that last year was kind of a pass, to me, it feels like it kind of has to be like,
is that Gus Malzahn though, or was that the terrible recruiting that we were coming up under, after Heupel left? It takes a couple of years to do that.
Agreed. He was left with a bunch of crap from Heupel, but he did bring in a lot of his own transfers because that was when the portal was just coming around. And granted, we weren't in the Big 12 yet, so they weren't as good as they were now. But now we're in year 4. Like these are all, there's no Heupel guys left, like maybe outside of a couple, right? So like it's now
his roster.
It's his roster, and like at this point, I know the resources and a couple other things still need to catch up, but there's no reason why and you say, Roger, all the time, like, we can out recruit all these schools right away because we're in Florida. So like, there's no reason why we shouldn't have as good of, if not better talent than every single school in the Big 12 right now. I know the depth still needs to build, but with year 4 and all the transfers and everything he's getting, like, there should be at least enough depth to be in the conference contention until the end of the year. So to me, it feels like, I don't want to call it like conference championship or bust, but if we're in like week 9 and we're completely out of it, I'd call it a bust. Like, I would say we need to be in contention until like almost the last week of the season. If we don't make it, at least we're in it and we know we can hang. But like,
I agree.
With the talent we have, there's no reason.
Yeah. I think the same. I think year 4, there shouldn't be excuses as far as, oh, these aren't my guys. These are your guys. A few here and there transfer portal, but again, you've gotten 4 recruiting cycles of your players. All of the guys that were the base guys and freshmen, they're seniors, juniors. All of our best players are his guys. We can look from the top to the bottom of the roster. Those are his guys. So I think with the departure of OU, with the departure of Texas, this conference is wide open. So, like Alan was saying,
you didn't add OU wasn't that great last year. We should have beat them last year.
But I'm just saying, as far as
Utah, we added some.
Utah's a beast. They're beasts.
Gus likes to say some real teams. They're a real team. There are some real teams that were added, and a lot of people, myself included, are sleeping a little bit on Arizona, but they did really well last year and are bringing back most of their team. Yeah.
And so they have a lot of beast quarterback and wide receiver room.
Yeah, and a lot of people were expecting them to, kind of transfer out after their head coach left, but that didn't happen. So, it'll be interesting to see how they fare this year. But I think between Arizona and Utah, I think you've got a couple of really good teams that we replaced them with, and I would say a healthy Utah could definitely beat Oklahoma, and I'm pretty certain would beat Texas too.
Yeah, I was saying it more so the Big 12, year in and year out, we get to this point of the year, it's always most teams are picking Texas. Most teams are picking OU to win the conference. That's just what it is. Right now, there's a lot of variance. Most people are leaning in the Utah from what I see. But it's wide open of who this conference is to grab. And I think, in my opinion, for UCF, if we go in and we might not have to win the conference championship, I think we have to be competing for it, like Alan said, until the last week of the season. If we can do that, I think we establish ourselves in the hierarchy of the conference, and we can even use that to kind of catapult us to where we want to be. Now, if we can win conference, I think that takes us to a different kind of heights, because you're talking UCF in the college football playoff. That's going to be insane. But I think if we have to be just off of the strength of Gus, this is your 4th year, these guys have been here. As far as there shouldn't be, we have to water down the offense. That's not an excuse anymore. It doesn't matter, because these guys should know it. These guys are juniors. These guys are seniors. That's not an excuse anymore. We should be able to run our best version of – this should be the best version of UCF we've seen Gus Malzahn. The reason we put it on Gus is because, like Alan said, Auburn in the past, what they talk about is he's the one that falls up short. It's never the recruiting. It's never the everything outside of on the field. It's Gus underwhelms in these big situations, big games. Typically.
It'll be interesting to see, because the big thing with the Big 12 is there were a lot of tight games last year, and they're expecting them this year. So, with parity comes tight games, and UCF has to find ways to win the tight games this year. That's the big thing. We led most of our games in the second half going into the second half last year. How do we respond, and can we win the tight games? And one of the things that's going to be a question mark is going to be the kicking game, because that also limited some of what we did last year as far as field goals and things were concerned, and drove us into some decisions that we probably wouldn't have made had we had Matty Ice back there or somebody else, right? So it'll be really, really interesting to see. Now, speaking of that 2017 team, that Trey was a part of. The SEC commish and Allen threw some shade at the Natty banner that he was talking about at the media day. So the SEC commish, was talking about Georgia, and was talking about FSU indirectly, and this whole argument about FSU being in the playoff, and said no SEC teams hung a banner. So it was in the context of why FSU's big mad being left out of the playoff. But he was kind of throwing shade by saying the banner thing, because FSU did not do that. They did have undefeated rings that they gave everybody, even though they were defeated that year, unlike the UCF team. Let's just put it this way. Props to UCF we're still living rent free in the SEC commissioner's head at this point, right? Two, that should be Trey, for you, that should be complimentary or vindicate how big of a thing you guys were able to accomplish in 2017 and 2018. Because let's give those guys their due too. They went undefeated during the regular season as well. They didn't get it done with sans Mackenzie Milton, but I think they would have had they had Mackenzie Milton. Sure. I think that would have been another undefeated season for UCF. So it just goes to show how big of a deal that season really was for UCF, that they're still that the commissioner of the SEC is talking about it on media days in 2024. And we all know that Allen doesn't think it's the Natty Championship. I disagree. Trey,
So we finally need to have this discussion. We need to have it. We don't have much
time. Hold
on.
on. Go ahead, Trey. Oh, I'm sorry. I think we're having some technical difficulties. So Trey agrees with me that it was a national championship. But no, go ahead, Trey.
No, I mean, if we're not going to wait on the guys to just have the full-on one, I'll say, for me, I understand the angle of why we claim it. It makes all the sense in the world. I get it. Other teams have done it. And it's not wrong to do it. The reason I say, for me, is because when we went out to play Auburn, I didn't prepare in my head, I'm like, we're about to play for the national championship. That's not how I prepared for it. I didn't get butterflies. I didn't get.
Well, hold on. So are you saying you saying you pulled an SEC team and said it just didn't matter as much because you guys weren't playing?
No. It mattered everything. I mean, because we wanted to finish the goal. There were so many different, that was when Frost was leaving, so much turmoil just within as far as, why is Coach Frost leaving? We don't want to practice, but we do want to finish the season right. Things like that was just going in. We wanted to finish the season right, not only for the seniors, but just to kind of close that chapter because we knew it was going to end. And we didn't want it to end the way, he's going to Nebraska and just kind of dumps us off for that. We didn't want it to end that way. We wanted to close the book. He didn't either. He wanted to close the book, finish it, move on, and have a good thing. So we didn't think, at least I'm saying, I'll speak for myself. I didn't go into that game thinking, I didn't prepare that game thinking this is the national championship. And granted, the reason I say that, I grew up wanting to play in the national championship game. I grew up thinking, after December, if we're playing, it was the BCS at the time. If we're preparing, we have a whole month to prepare for whoever we have to play for. Like I remember just getting butterflies thinking about it. When we went to prepare for Auburn, it was just another game. Was it a big game? Absolutely. But me personally, didn't see it as a national championship game. So that's why I don't necessarily say, I'm national champion because I didn't play in the national championship game.
Hold on. In the NCAA record books.
Oh, yeah.
You are a national champion.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a legitimate national championship.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't disagree with any of that because technically, yes, we have a national championship. It's just me personally. I don't say, yeah, we won the national championship because we didn't play in the national championship. Did we have a national championship? Absolutely. Did we play in the national championship? We didn't. That's why I don't say it. But again, I don't. If people
you didn't play in the Invitational. That wasn't a national championship. No matter what you say, as long as it was an invitational and it wasn't an opportunity for everybody and the best teams weren't put into
but it's
the playoff,
always
it's not going to be a championship.
Always.
No, it's not. I mean, think about it this way. In today's environment, if you're in the Power 5, you get an auto bid. You don't even have to be undefeated.
Because last year, FSU didn't.
In today's Power 5.
Well, Power 4. I'm just saying. Like,
Power 4, Power 3, 2.5. I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
I think we're going to get to a point where, because I talked about this to like some of my friends. Liberty right now, I think they're going to go into this season ranked. They remind me a little bit of us, Liberty. If I looked at their schedule, they should beat everybody on their schedule. I find it very hard to believe the committee is going to put them as a top 12 team over a 10-2 SEC team, a 10-2 UCF team. And I think they will get hosed by that. And because ultimately it's not
the G5 currently has a spot in the playoff now.
That's just, I don't think they're going, like, I think it's because at the end of the day, it's revenue. It's revenue. At the end of the day, they want whatever game is going to get us the most money.
All right, so let's compare here real quick, just for funsies. Okay, Liberty's playing Campbell, which we haven't played since we were D3. New Mexico State, UTEP, East Carolina, App State, FIU, Kennesaw State, Jax State, Middle Tennessee, UMass, Western Kentucky, and Sam Houston State. Okay, you can tell me what you want, but the AAC, when you guys played and went undefeated, was a heck of a lot better than that schedule.
1,000%.
And they were a lot closer to the Power 5 at that time than what.
I completely agree. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, if you guys are telling me there's an automatic G5 bid, they're probably going to get it. Because I think they're going to start the season ranked. They will probably be the highest ranked G5 team. And you look
they have the most money to throw around of all the G5 teams too.
And then you look at that schedule. Do you think, say we go 10-2, and our only losses are to, we say, Utah and I don't know who's a tough opponent on our schedule right now.
Arizona or West Virginia.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Kansas State. Do we have Kansas State this year?
No, Kansas State.
So say those are our only two losses. How would you feel if we missed the playoff and they let Liberty in, and we miss it just by that one slot?
I don't know, but we have a common opponent this year. Sam Houston State, baby.
It's an automatic. They're not getting it over us.
No, I get it. I'm just saying in the sense of it doesn't feel right.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, It doesn't feel right that they can just, quote unquote, walk into the playoff just because they played a weak schedule and they're the only G5 bid, even though they're not the most deserving team. That's why I was saying, like, it's still an
imperfect system. It's
an imperfect system. It's always going to be some semblance of it's messed up. It's always like that. And I think that just goes for in college. I don't think there's a perfect system in anything, even basketball. There's always teams that get left out that seem like they're deserving for whatever reason. Baseball, like, there's just so many teams, you can't have a perfect system. So again, that's where I go to the point of the invitational. It's still an invitational. We just upped out how many invitations they send out. You know, now instead of the 4 invitations, you have automatic invitations and at-large invitations. You know, and I think they're still invitationals. You know, and I think that's where it's just, for me, we didn't prepare to play in the national championship. That's where, like, my differences are. I don't feel like we played the national championship, so I don't say we won the national championship. Can you say that we're national champs? Absolutely. I don't disagree with that because technically we are. But that's just my take on it. You know, I know plenty of guys feel the same way. Some people are far more, they don't like it. And then, like, they don't even like the rings that we got because they don't feel like that's what our season should stand for. And then I know some guys that are, you know, hell-bent on, very strongly.
We're a clean show, Trey. We're not E for explicit.
Yeah, they're very strongly bent on we're national champs. We deserve it. We were the best team, only undefeated team. I understand both points, and they make valid for both points. It's just me personally. We didn't play in a national championship game, so we couldn't have done it. That's just me.
All right. Well, I'm still big man. Oh, go ahead, Alan, if you had a point. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know if this is the whole discussion because this could probably unravel into a couple hour long discussion.
Yeah.
It's like if you ever saw the movie Shallow Hal, and like, you know,
heard of it but never watched it.
Then this point is never mind. Then I'll just start from a different point. Then
it's always bad to go with movie references because 3/4 of the audience may not have seen the reference. So
yeah, like it just, as much as the system was unfair, like that's the side to me, the genius of Danny White was a marketing move that made, and someone that's in marketing, that made everyone talk about us, whether it was negative or positive. There's people like we always bring up now, like when you see a tweet about it or whatever, we just saw the SEC commissioner reference it. Like we are always able to say, hey, we live rent free in their head, even 6 years later, 5 years later, whatever. So it was a genius move, but like that doesn't mean we were the main national champion. Like, sure, we can call ourselves a national champion, but I'm sorry, like the feeling that I got, there's no way that's not going to be surpassed by. I don't even disagree, like with a real national. It's just not. Like it was an amazing, like going undefeated was awesome, but like if we did that same thing and beat Alabama in that invitational, I'm sorry, I just would have felt better. Like I feel like most people can reasonably agree with that.
Well, we probably would have. We just never got the chance.
I agree. It's a feeling. I'm with you, Alan. It's a feeling. There's a different feeling. When we won the Peach Bowl, was it amazing? Absolutely. I could not imagine if that was the national championship game. Like, I can't imagine it. Like, that feeling would have been times a billion because that's what you dream of as a kid playing college football. You dream to play in the national championship and win that game. So, again, it's mostly feeling because, again, Danny White, he's a brilliant like, that was brilliant. And to write, because it's carrying us now. Like you said, 7 years later, 6 years later, they're still talking about it. And this went to my point a few weeks ago where I'm like, would you want to win 5 national championships? Because that's what I think of when you win a national championship. That's the kind of things that I think 10 years from now, they're going to talk about that 2017 run.
I think you're going to get a case study in that with the Miami Hurricanes here coming up soon. So we'll see whether you agree with that take or not. Although Trey said he wants Cristobal out so Frost can take over down there and we can get free stuff. So I'm all about free stuff, but all right. So let's shift gears a little bit. I'm still big mad at the SEC commish for throwing shade indirectly. JRP. So speaking of last year's team, JRP signed 3rd overall and drafted 3rd overall by the UFL's Arlington Renegades. So Alan, you wanted to add a little bit more color to that. Just because he's going to the UFL or was drafted in the UFL doesn't mean he's going to be in the UFL. So why don't you give a little bit of background there?
Yeah, so basically, and this is the case for all players that were drafted in the UFL, at any point, if they get an offer from the NFL, whether they've already signed as an undrafted free agent after this recent 2024 draft, or let's just even say, they didn't get an NFL, contract and, they choose to sign with a UFL team and then an NFL team kind of notices them, they're allowed to leave at any point up to December 31st to go to the NFL. So they can basically, essentially break their UFL contract to go to the NFL. And I think the UFL also is kind of promoting that fact. If you look at the UFL's recent Instagram posts, they kind of boast about how many players after playing in the UFL were able to get NFL contracts. So it's kind of in The Rock, who is, the XFL and the USFL merged to form this UFL group, UFL league, I should say. The Rock is one of the co-owners or co-founders, even talked about that. Like, this is that's the point of this league, is for those guys that are not getting noticed by the NFL. Maybe they had great college careers, but were overlooked in the draft. And after that, this is going to be, essentially a breeding ground for them to potentially get an NFL contract. So as it pertains to JRP, as we know, he got an undrafted deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was a 3-year, $2.8 million deal, but only $35K of that is guaranteed. So he actually just got drafted, like you said, with the 3rd overall pick in the UFL draft. So the Renegades have his rights, his draft rights. He can start playing there because he obviously, as the 3rd overall pick, has a much better chance of making that team and being a starter, or being at least, someone that plays. But if he does do well in, Steelers camp for the rest of this preseason and gets named, to the roster, to the primary roster, not the practice squad, he can basically forego going to the Renegades and stay with the Steelers.
Right. And so best wishes to him. Either way, I saw on his Instagram that he's now rocking a mustache for the first time in his life. I don't know. Not a fan of the 70s mustache thing he's got going on there. I mean, it's cool for people to do it. I'm just that's just not his MO, because it denotes something else that was going on in the 70s, and we'll just leave it at that. Because unlike Trey, we are a clean show, so we're going to leave it at that.
Well, can we also say that if you want to count it, he ties Blake Bortles for the highest ever draft pick in a football draft. Now, not the NFL, but Blake was 3rd overall. JRP was 3rd overall.
I'm just UFL, NFL. Come on.
It's kind of like the Natty Championship versus the real one.
Well, like you just said, no, it's totally different. Like, think about it this way. You said it yourself. This was one of the advantages that The Rock said he was trying to provide, was an opportunity to go to the NFL. You know what I mean? So no, it's not the same thing. I mean, congratulations to JRP.
It's cool though to see, even though it's UFL, when I saw it was a 3rd overall pick, I was like, whoa, that just kind of jumps out, even though it's, obviously a lesser league and everything. But, obviously, he was a 1st round draft pick for that team, their 1st overall pick, the Renegades. And then, the fact that he was 3rd overall in a draft that I don't know how many rounds or how many players, but still, it's definitely noteworthy when you see it, like, wow, 3rd overall,
Well, think about it this way, right? So the average NFL starting quarterback's career is what? Something like 8 to 10 years, right?
Correct.
Would you say? Okay.
Quarterback, you said? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say so.
So they keep 3 quarterbacks typically on each roster, right? 1st string, 2nd string, 3rd string. So that's 96 players playing at any given time. If you divide that by 10 years, that's 9 quarterbacks per year that are coming out of college that are going to the NFL, right? Only 9 quarterbacks. And we all know how many NCAA teams there are. So being a quarterback that's going to make it in the league for any length of time, that's really, really difficult to do. And there's been a lot of people who were projected to be great, like the Ryan Leaf story, that weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other examples, but the whole point is it's really difficult to do. The fact that, he's going to be given a chance to play quarterback, and he has that backup to continue playing football no matter what happens, and has another chance to go to the league eventually in some capacity. I think that's awesome for him. JRP, he grew last year, but he was also injured a lot last year. He missed 3 games, and the games that he did play, he was obviously injured. Same way with that Tulane championship game, which I was there for. He was playing injured. So, he's a good dude. He's got talent. How it's being utilized and where he lands is going to be really interesting. Most players don't make it, if they get a camp invite. And if he doesn't, then he gets another chance at it by going to the UFL and showing off. And at least he'll be able to play quarterback if he chooses that's what he wants to continue to do. So I can tell you, having not continued my football career, it's really hard to walk away from football. And when you do, you miss it every single day. So All right. So congrats to JRP. One more bit of UCF football news. Just so that we've got it out there. We recently this week got another $2.5 million donation from the Wayne Dench Trust. And the practice fields, the ones that are being moved into a lot of people's parking spaces, will be named after Wayne Dench. One thing to think about too, Wayne Dench has been a consistent contributor to UCF football dating all the way back to 1985. And at that time, committed and donated $1 million in 1985, which saved UCF's football program at the time. He then donated another $2.5 million in 2002, which is why we had the Wayne Dench facility on campus that we've all known for so long, or affectionately known the Dench, and now stepped up with more. He's contributed, and his trust has contributed at other times that weren't such big name donations, but he's consistently been, and the foundation have consistently been contributors to UCF football, and we thank them for that. So huge shout out to the Wayne Dench Foundation, and another step forwards towards the rest, not just the tower, but everything else that's going into the football facility, including the Lazy River, aka Recovery Cove, aka whatever else you want to insert there. All right, let's go ahead and pivot. Pivot. Okay, Alan's on delay. To UCF football. John Rothstein came out recently, or Stein came out recently and provided his initial rankings for the Big 12 this year. UCF checks in at number 11. His projected starting five for UCF is Darius Johnson at guard, Jalen Sellers at guard, Mikey Williams at guard, which is interesting. Mikey Williams, by the way, should be joining UCF in the next couple of weeks. His legal situation should be resolved, and he can actually sign on campus. He's been on campus. He's been practicing, but he could not be part of the team until those legal issues were resolved. Forward Keyshawn Hall and center Mustafa Tiem, that five-star recruit that came in and reclassified early off the bench. And this is what's really, really interesting to me and exciting to me. We've talked about some of these guys, and we'll talk more as we go to basketball season. But on the bench, Dior Johnson, which is a huge name, another former five-star player. Benny Williams from Syracuse. Dallin Coleman, J.J. Taylor, Jordan Ivy Curry, again, big name. Rokas Jokas, I don't know how to say that yet. I'll have to get the UCF announcement guide. We haven't got the press guide yet to give us the pronunciation, but we'll say Josius or Jokas. I'm going to go with Rokas Jokas right now because it sounds better. Elijah Hulsewi, Cameron Simpson, Niels Machowski, and Tyler Hendricks. So a lot of big names, a lot of big name transfers, scoring a lot of points on there. And because of that, he also rated the key losses for each team this year. And for UCF, he listed a grand total of 0 key losses. And Alan was talking a little bit about this before the show, and he was surprised at that. So, Alan, why are you surprised that he listed no key losses this?
Well, I know we got obviously like Sellers back and DJ, but I don't know. I just thought I remember just like we've talked about with Ben that isn't essentially we basically lost every player last year outside of the starting lineup, isn't it? I mean, because we know that obviously CJ Walker left. We lost Shamari Allen. I thought it was something. Yeah, but even so, I mean, that's still a loss. I mean, whether it's a graduation or a transfer, unless he was exclusively talking about transfers, which generally when you talk about departures, you talk about both transfers and graduates. And then didn't we lose our center as well? Because that was the whole reason we kept saying we didn't have like any big men. So I don't know I think that's roughly at least 3 guys that got significant or decent amount of minutes. Maybe they're more role players than, the stars of the team, obviously, but I don't know. I guess it depends on what your definition of key is. But I think, when you talk about, especially basketball, I think depth is so important in those role players. You see it in the NBA on championship teams, like when you're too top heavy, like a Phoenix Suns, where they only have, Booker, Durant, and Beal, and they have no role players. It's the teams with the stars and the role players that always win. So I think when you lose some of those key role players, it does matter. But obviously, we talked about that they were replaced by, better talented players, and Johnny was cooking. So I guess if you look at it through that lens, then maybe we didn't lose anyone big.
Yeah, I think that really sums it up, right? Is I think John was looking at it from a perspective that the people that we replace them with have, more points per game and on paper are better players than the outgoing players. Now, that says a lot because the team last year overperformed, did pretty well, and performed at a much higher level than we expected. So if that's the case, and there were no key losses off of that team, and these guys are that much better, which on paper they should be, that should mean that the expectations are higher than 11. One of the things that he also mentioned in the article was, again, this is a dark horse team. Both in our football and basketball, everybody's picking UCF as the dark horse. And I think everybody's kind of expecting UCF to be better. But with this being a new team being thrown together, I think there's some hesitation there, and it could go either way. So plus you've got a lot of different personalities, and we'll be playing a little bit different of a scheme, given that we're very, very guard heavy and forward heavy, and less reliance on the big men down in the paint. So I think that's where that's coming from. But, there's a lot of thought around the fact that these teams or this team could be really, 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 really good and could finish a lot higher than 11. So I'm excited about the season if they come together, and we'll see more in preseason before they get into the conference on how they're starting to gel. If they come together as quickly as they did last year, then this could be a very, very good team.
No doubt. No doubt.
All right. Alan, we mentioned earlier that we have no Josh Lazar this week. And if you notice, Trey is no longer talking because he would be screaming at the top of his lungs how this is an Elite Eight team. He's made that prediction for quite a while now. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think we'll be good. I think we'll be an NCAA team, but I don't know about an Elite Eight team. Do you have any shots to fire at Josh for your oxymoronic stat of the week, or no?
No oxymoronic stat this week. As we get closer to the season, we start doing previews. I know we're going to get into positional previews, offense, defense, special teams. I'll definitely have some good stats when we get to that. We're almost there, guys. We're 6 days away from being a month out. Exactly.
6 days away from being a month out. That's one heck of a way to put it, Alan.
Or how about this? We are 9 days away from being able to say UCF football is this month.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go with that. Camp's starting soon, folks. Let's go with that. But yeah, we're getting closer, and you're right, Alan. We're a little over 5 weeks away. So it's getting here, and we've got Alan's grasping at straws. That's right, Nover.
We're close.
Yeah, if you guys are not watching this on YouTube, there are fun little shots that we take at each other in the banners as we kind of move along. But you're right, Alan. Something to look forward to. Super excited, and I guess that's it for this week. So without further ado, make sure to follow, subscribe, like. Make sure you're checking us out. Continue to comment. Welcome to our new followers and subscribers. We appreciate you. Remember to give us feedback. We're always looking for feedback on how to make the show better. We promise we'll stay away from the realignment talk as we get more football news and get closer to the season, and we'll get a lot more technical. And as a reminder, we'll have some folks on the show to chat about that. Look out for the new Big 3-4 podcast coming your way soon. Go Knights and
charge on.
All right, so let's see how long Nobra allows me to continue talking like Josh. Oh, he's letting it go a little longer. What am I going to make up to go